Perfect. Well, first, let me introduce my guest for today's live. He's from India. He's the CEO of Ecotact. Ecotec is a hermetic bag manufacturer. Of course, he will be the best person to talk about his company, about himself. So thank you, Hanuman, for joining PDG Live. If you would like to quickly introduce yourself and Ecotect, what you do, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. It's first of all, good morning, bon dia, buenos dias. So, and I think during the COVID times, I should be saying namaste. That's a better option at these times, I believe. I myself am Hanuman Jain, the CEO of Ecotact. We are the producers of hermetic packaging, a 9-layered hermetic packaging, and we provide packaging for coffee industry, cocoa industry, and other premium food grains across the world. And I am by education a postgraduate, an MBA from a premium institute of India known as TFI Management Institute. And I am in business since 2003. Mm-hmm. So it is a first generation business, I would say. I started with packaging for coffee industry specifically. We started with jute bags, high quality hydrocarbon free jute bags for coffee industry. Started mostly with African countries. And that is where I got to interact more with people from coffee industry, cocoa industry, and I got to know more about coffee and the dynamics related to coffee. Mm-hmm. Coffee is such a beautiful world, I have to say that, because having traveled over 50 countries in the world and having met people from coffee industry from across the world, I can very clearly say that, coffee industry is one very rare industry wherein, it's like a global family. You see same people over and over again across the world. I'm sure you are connected to coffee industry and you would vouch for that as well, And it has been a pleasure being in this industry. It's because there is a lot of appreciation for quality here. People appreciate, if you're working hard on what you're doing, and that is something which you always revere,
Yes, so, definitely. Definitely.
So in terms of transition from a mere, jute bag to Ecotact, being in the coffee industry, I would travel a lot. And back in, I think, 2008-9, I spent a lot of time in a country called Cameroon. It's in the West Africa, which is where there were some farmers who had some need for the storage of cowpeas. And cowpeas were very, very unique to Cameroon. And they had this problem of insect infestation, which they needed not very expensive packaging, but at the same time wanted to preserve their food grains. So this is where our work started. And since we were into coffee industry, we quickly, rolled out our product into coffee industry as well, because coffee industry had a very unique need of preserving moisture and aroma for a very long duration. So this is the brief history, I would say, of Ecotact. And since 2011, I would say, when Ecotact was introduced, we have grown every year. And today I can, emphatically say we are selling our product in over 45 countries across the globe. We have distribution in more than 15 countries. And it's a wonderful arena, to be in.
Perfect. Yes, no, definitely. What I would like you to, if you quickly just introduce the product, the hermetic bag. I think a lot of people, they never heard this term before, and it is a crucial product to ensure that the green bean quality remains the same. So why don't you quickly introduce what is an hermetic bag and what it is made for?
I'm glad you asked this because, food grains, be it coffee, be it any other food grains, the biggest problem in the food grain industry is whatever is produced, more than half of it gets damaged. Why? Because of storage, because of improper storage, because of insect infestation. So post harvest is a very critical junction, and wherein you need something which can preserve that food grain for a longer duration, economically and easy to use. So this is where we come in. I would say still, coffee industry and cocoa industry, they have been leaders in terms of, paying attention to packaging, paying, attention to the technology of packaging. So in coffee industry, so our packaging is highly focused on coffee and cocoa industry, wherein the moisture and aroma are two very critical factors. So what our packaging does is keeps the food grains airtight, and with this airtight packaging, no oxygen or moisture from outside can enter into the packaging, and what you leave inside is what you get. So when you're putting coffee or cocoa into this kind of packaging, you don't find insect infestation. You don't need, there's no mold growth. You don't need, insecticide, pesticide to preserve your grain. At the same time, the essential factors of coffee, which is aroma and moisture, are preserved till the time it reaches the roaster for roasting, and that's very, very critical. In we provide a technology which is a 9-layered high barrier packaging, and coffee remains intact in terms of aroma and moisture for more than a year of its storage, transportation to containers, moving from one arena of the world to a totally different arena of the world. And this is where we play an important role. A coffee connoisseur would like to get the freshness, the fresh aroma, and the taste, the high cupping score of the coffee, which I think our packaging does play an important role in.
Okay. No, thank you. Perfect for the explanation. So the topic, you mentioned the importance of retaining the moisture content inside the bean, not having a loss in the moisture content, not having a gain in the moisture content. That's really the importance of an hermetic bag. So the topic of today's live is why green bean moisture content is important. And I think your insights will be very valuable to clarify why green bean moisture content, it is actually very, very important. So my first question to you, Hanuman, would be, what is green bean moisture content, a short definition of it, and how it differs from green bean water activity? I think that's a very good question for both producers, traders, exporters, importers, and also roasters. So if you could please go over those different terms, moisture content and water activity, and what are the key differences between them?
Right. So moisture is a terminology we hear very often in coffee trade. It is one of the most used terminology, I would say, in the coffee world, be it at the producer level, be it at the roaster level, be it at the traders level. It's a terminology which is used enormously. Moisture essentially refers to water. It's a form of water. So when you talk about moisture content in a coffee, in any coffee, you would say the percentage of water in coffee. And why is it so important? What is the role that moisture plays? See, you need coffee to have moisture at optimum level, because you need some water when you're roasting coffee. You need water in the process of roasting, wherein when you're roasting, the heat should transmit to even the centermost portion of the green bean. Now, water, being a very good conductor of heat, carries that heat right at the center of the bean, and uniformly the roasting happens. So what is a very important role, and moisture is a very important role in coffee industry. Eventually, somebody is drinking coffee, it's a roasted coffee, so moisture has a role right there. And So what is this new terminology, or I would say now for past few years, there's a new terminology which is being used very often, which is water activity. Now, moisture or water and water activity are two different concepts, or two different terminologies. What do you mean by it? What is its role? So
Mm-hmm.
moisture, as I mentioned, has a very critical role to play, but at the same time, water activity is referring to the vapor pressure, or in a layman's term, what does a parameter of water activity leads to? So as a layman, water activity parameter would refer to the shelf life. How much of a shelf life are you predicting of this coffee? At the same time, is the coffee very susceptible to insect infestation, or microorganism attack?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what water activity determines. So these are two very critical factors, and moisture has as I mentioned, has a very critical role in having in maintaining coffee's aroma and moisture, the flavor. So if, for example, if the moisture content falls way below the optimum level, then you
Mm-hmm.
don't get any flavor, you don't get any aroma. So moisture has a very important role over there. Whereas water activity determines the product effect. As mentioned, several products have this browning effect. So when the coffee is roasted, it has that browning effect. And water activity has an important role to play in browning effect. Water activity has an important role in providing the shelf life of the product. So these are the two different concepts which will determine, in technical terms, how long will the coffee survive, how good is the coffee for a coffee connoisseur. So these are the two terminology which clearly determines. So each has its individual role. Moisture has a different role and water activity has a different role. Both are equally important, and it's very important to figure out what the levels are for both these terminologies. So ICO has given some numbers for optimum moisture, and
Mm-hmm.
also there are the amount of research which coffee industry has
Mm-hmm.
taken. There are optimum levels for water activity also. So if I may point out, in terms of moisture, the optimum level is considered to be 9 to 12%. But again, it depends whether, if you are a producer, what is the moisture percentage that you would ideally like to have. So
Mm-hmm.
if you look at that aspect, for a producer, I would say close to 12%, between 11 to 12% is the ideal level, because they would not want that too much of moisture is also goes out of it. Otherwise, they will have repercussions on their selling. At the same time,
Sure.
if you're talking about roaster, for roaster, the optimum level would be 10 to 10.5%, or something below 11% is what a roaster would like to have, because that is the level wherein a roaster considers that the coffee flavor, aroma, and the cupping score can be optimized. So these are two different parameters, but slightly varying, not too much of a variation. However, I would say that moisture should not be too high; it should not be too less at the same time. So this is very critical for both the parties. I would say the consumer buyer, or the producer exporter. So for both the parties, it's very critical. In terms of
Mm-hmm.
water activity, the optimum water activity level would be zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.6. It is measured in a scale of 0 to 1. So 0.45 to zero point 0.6 is considered to be the best levels, wherein there is minimum chance of for microorganisms to grow. So it is 0.45 to zero point 0.6 is considered to be stable water activity level in a coffee in coffee. So these are the two important parameters. These are the levels which are the optimum levels, and this is how worldwide are considered critical numbers. But again, I would like to point out very important point in this, that
Mm-hmm.
globally, coffee grown in Costa Rica and coffee grown in Papua New Guinea at what sea level have they been grown varies from, totally varies at a large level. So you have to handle those coffee based on the region, based on at the sea level it has been grown. So all these are it's not just water activity and moisture, but other important parameters are also to be considered. So you cannot be considering only moisture levels in isolation. You have to consider water activity, you have to consider the temperature the coffee has to be preserved, the humidity levels that you store a coffee in. So all these parameters are these two parameters, moisture and water activity, can help somebody decide which coffee should we buy, in what form should we sell. So all these, becomes more apparent, becomes easier for the people who are involved in coffee trades.
No, perfect. Thank you. We had a question about what is the shelf life of a green bean. I think that's because that's very related with the moisture content and the water activity. How long will the green bean last? So what is the shelf life of a green bean?
See, again, as I mentioned before, shelf life is largely dependent on water activity, moisture, and how you store the coffee. If you don't store the coffee in an appropriate manner, in the optimum manner, then again the shelf life gets reduced into a significant level. So if I'm just taking a cue out of it, that if you preserve green coffee in Ecotact, dried green coffee in Ecotec, you can preserve green coffee for more than a year in its optimum condition, with its aroma, with its moisture control. So you have to provide that condition to preserve it for a longer duration. If you don't preserve it, if you merely, if you store a green bean in very humid condition or in very high temperature or very bright light, the coffee will not last long. I would say 3, 4, 5 months is the maximum it is going to last. And at the same time, it will lose its aroma, freshness, all that gets lost. So I think this would be the answer, that close to 1 year is what you're looking at if you store it properly. That's the shelf life of green coffee.
Perfect. Thank you. My next question, I see that there was a question about what is the ideal moisture content. You briefly mentioned this. For people that are watching this live, we'll be making available on PDG IGTV. So you can always go there and check Hanuman insights about moisture content. So my next question, Ms. Hanuman, would be how much moisture content is acceptable in a green bean to avoid losing quality? I know you already mentioned this. However, if you quickly could dive more into the details of why it is important to be at that level of acceptable moisture content to avoid losing quality.
Absolutely. You have hit it on the nail. 10 to 12% is the range. If you're talking from the perspective of a roaster, so 10 to 10.5% or maximum 11% is what a roaster would want. He would not want anything more than that. But if you're looking at producer part or an exporter part, close to 12%, I would say 11 to 12, 11.5, 12% is what you're looking at. Again, a lot of it depends also, from which region it is getting exported. If it's a very humid place, you will slightly look at it at a higher side. But if it's not a very humid place, low humidity arena, you will be looking at slightly lower number. So this is the ideal moisture level.
No, perfect. And also, when you are at origin, you need to have a little bit high moisture content, because when it arrives at the destination, there is this small variation due to logistical time during the time that the green bean is inside the bag and being transported from origin to destination, correct?
Absolutely. It's very interesting, coffee cherry. When you pluck a coffee cherry, it has close to 60% moisture. So after you pluck the cherry and then you start processing it, the moisture level, when you have wet milling has been done, at that point in time the moisture content is close to 40-45%, and then it's dried to an optimum level. in different method. So and brought down to close to 12%. So yes, you're right. Moisture level would vary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And what would happen if you over dry your green beans? So you are preparing them, is going to be ready to be exported or ready to be stored, and you end up over drying them. What will happen into the taste in the cup when you over dry green beans?
All right. So when you are over drying, if you look at producer or exporter part, the losses start from there. You know, when you're packing your coffee to be sold, the dried coffee to be sold, if it's over dried, then you are kind of giving more coffee than you would actually want in a bag, you know, because it's more, the weight part will have more of coffee and less of moisture. So the losses start right there. So as a producer, you would not want to over dry. That's one big reason as well, because it converts into the money that he's earning. At the same time, when if you're looking at the consumption side, then you know it has a lot of impact. I am told that anything below 9% moisture loses all its flavor. Below 9% it loses its aroma, and if you go below 8%, the entire flavor is gone. There is no taste at all. So over drying has a lot of impact. You have grown coffee in one of the best farms of Yemen, and one of the most expensive coffee. But if you have over dried it, the final consumer doesn't get the taste of it, doesn't get the aroma of it. The whole purpose gets defeated. So over drying has its significant consequences.
Perfect. Thank you. Also, I have a question. Different origins have different moisture content. It's because I've heard that African beans usually have a lower moisture content than beans from Central and South America. Is this correct, or is origins have different moisture content? And there is a change in how the cup of coffee will taste from those origins?
See, there are a couple of things which I have seen myself. Coffee which is produced at high altitude and low humidity levels, but when the coffee is taken to the processing center, or I would say milling section, if the milling area has a lot of moisture, then it can make a lot of difference. For example, I'll give you an example of Indonesia. A client of ours did mention this to us, that at the point of their warehouse, when they are packing, the moisture levels are very high, and that leads to higher moisture levels in the coffee bean itself, and sometimes condensation also happens. Condensation leads to bad taste and mold growth, moldy taste. So that's not a very good idea to have. So again, the similar situation I have seen in Mexico. There are some places in Chiapas where you have higher moisture level at the warehouse level, but not so much at the farm level. So again, it varies from country to country and where you are processing the coffee. So it becomes very important when you are packing the green bean. The moisture levels or humidity levels should be optimum. I would say 60 to 70% is what you're looking at, relative humidity in the atmosphere. If that's the case, that's the most ideal condition. Or the best thing would be to have a warehouse which is temperature and moisture controlled. So that kind of optimizes your pricing when it is pricing, and also the value which a roaster and the eventual consumer derives out of it. Now, coming specific to Africa and Latin America, moisture levels in Africa is low. No, I tend to disagree on that, because again in Africa also you have different countries. You have Rwanda, you have Uganda, you have Tanzania. So you have to look at which country are you looking at, which specific origin you're looking at. You can't have a blanket statement saying moisture levels of coffee from Central America, South America are more than Africa. I tend to disagree on that based on my experience. So it varies from country to country, even farm to farm many a times.
So it's important basically for you to know your supply chain, where coffee is being stored at the farm level, where coffee is being stored at the warehouse level, and especially how it's going to be stored during transit.
Absolutely, absolutely. See, for example, when we talk about Ecotec, we are talking about the coffee remains intact at very high temperature, also very low temperature, also very high humidity level, very low humidity level, also. But it is very critical that when you pack your coffee at that point in time and that place where you're packing in, it's very critical that what moisture levels are you living, what humidity levels are you packing it in. So if you pack at very humid place and your warehouse humidity levels are very high, then at times you can have condensation. Be it any packaging, you can have that kind of aspect. So it's very critical to focus on those aspects also.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you. You were mentioning about when you over dry, but you were mentioned, sorry, about when you over dry your beans. But what happens when you under dry? So this means you have beans that have a high moisture content, and let's say you are an exporter or an importer, and you are bringing this bean to your place and it has like, let's say 13% moisture content or even more. What are the issues that this can cause to the bean, and what are the issues this can cause to your during roasting, or especially when serving this bean to your customers?
See, when the moisture levels are very high, there is a lot of chance of mold growth. I would not say if it's packed in Ecotact, no. But if you have stored it in before packing it for exports, if you're packed in your warehouse in regular jute bags or any of the regular polypropylene bags, then in those cases there is a possibility of mold growth. There is a possibility of fermentation. There is so you will have the cupping scores will fall down significantly when you are eventually roasting and having the cupping scores. So you will have that problem, which is very 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 significant. At the same time, coffee importer or a coffee roaster who is buying coffee gets more moisture and less of coffee. So when you are eventually producing roasted coffee, you get less produce out of it. So it's a loss at the consuming level. So you can have bad relationship with your buyer, eventual buyer who provides you the pricing. So it's a loss at both the ends, and most importantly, the buyer, eventual consumer, and the buyer doesn't get to taste your real coffee or the real aroma and taste of your coffee. The flavors, the notes of the fruity notes and the real thing that you expect in coffee, you miss out on that. And rather than that, you get that mold, mold taste and mold smell, which is not desirable on the whole.
Yeah, it's impressive because at the end, the producer puts a lot of effort to produce a coffee. There's a lot of effort to process that coffee. There's a lot of effort on the logistical side, but if you don't secure the storage of that green bean, you can lose everything. Basically, you lose all the value of the bean.
If I may say so, it's a lose-lose situation for everybody.
Yes, I agree. Now, looking at the origin level, what advice would you give to producers on the best practices to store green bean at the producer level?
See, at the producer level, there are 2 or 3 things which I would like to say. When coffee is, when the cherry is picked and brought for for processing and then drying, or either ways, even if you don't process and you straight away dry, in both the cases, I would say you need to start using hermetic packaging. Ecotact is a leader in hermetic packaging, and it can play a very important role even at the parchment. Even when you're storing your parchment, if you're storing your parchment at 12%, and if the humidity levels outside are very high, then even your parchment can, because coffee, as you know, is hygroscopic in nature, it can draw moisture from the atmosphere. So in order to avoid that, at the parchment level itself, coffee should be preserved in airtight packaging of Ecotact. Subsequently, just before the exports, you take out the parchment, dehusk it, and then prepare it for the final exports, and then you again repack it into hermetic packaging for your exports. So in that manner, that is the way how you can preserve the coffee in the best of its taste and aroma for a very long duration. At the same time, it is very critical to also pay attention to the temperature levels that you're storing your packaging, your coffee in generally, or again, in some of the cases, when you're doing honey processing or natural processing, in such cases also hermetic packaging plays an important role. So you can use hermetic packaging for those processes also. And so these are the best practices which are being followed worldwide now.
Mhm.
People in Colombia, people in Ethiopia, people in Indonesia, they are using right at the farm level, at the producers level, and then gradually you pay attention to moisture, water activity at the time of packing, and then during its transport. Small little things, when you pack your coffee and ship it, if there is not enough attention paid, that hooks are used at several of the ports, hooks are used on the bags, and if somebody punctures
Mhm.
the coffee bags, the whole purpose of hermetic packaging gets defeated, and
Yes.
the coffee packed in a hermetic bag, but at the same time, if it is punctured, then the whole purpose is defeated, and you don't get the same cupping score that you get in the regular ones, which has been packed properly. So packaging has a very significant role in preserving green coffee, and again, when you have stored your coffee in your warehouse, you would see that many people open the bags, again close the bags, open the bags, close the bags to draw some of the coffee,
Yes.
roast it, and but this is not a very healthy practice. You can't, if you do it very often, then you are exposing your coffee to atmospheric moisture and temperature, which is not desirable. So ideally, if you are having to cup the green coffee, you can have sample bags with some of the exact samples in those sampler bags, and you can keep on cupping them. So frequent opening of the actual stored bag is not a desirable aspect. So these
Mhm.
are some of the best practices, I would say, to avoid worsening of coffee from what it actually is.
Uh-huh. No, perfect, perfect. And thinking now about the roaster level. So roasters, they are in an environment that is usually smaller than a coffee farm or a coffee warehouse, and they have to roast batches of coffees during the time of a couple of months. So how to ensure that that green bean is going to keep the same taste and quality over time? What tips would you recommend them?
So as I mentioned, frequent opening and closing of the bags should be avoided. Uh, I mean, you can perhaps, if somebody is a roaster, he can get some sample bags of the same coffee packed
Mhm.
at the same time. At the time when the coffee is packed in the bigger bags. So those samples would be very representative and ideal to do cupping at your end. And then if you're not frequently opening and closing it, I think coffee would remain intact, would have better scores. And again, at the warehouse level, I would say some attention to that the conditions of warehouse is also very important, and the handling
Mhm.
there is very important. So roasters would have to pay attention to those things, and I think nothing more significant, not too many steps, because already that half of their work has been done at the producer and exporter level.
Yes, yes, definitely. I would like to ask. there are different sizes of hermetic bags, and I think this is mostly due to the convenience for roasteries to carry them, to place them around the roastery. Some of them are very, very small roasteries, especially with third wave roasteries. And I'm sure you offer those different volumes from 60 kilo bags to 30 kilo bags, and I believe even a smaller one, correct, for roasters. How does benefit roasters in terms of the logistical inside the roastery environment to have smaller hermetic bags to use to roast small batches of coffee? How does it impact the roasting day to day?
Yeah, so there has been need for smaller packaging for years, but not much attention was paid to this aspect. I would say, even at the sample level, which is like the most important aspect of coffee industry, I would say, not much attention was paid to the sampling aspect. So we realized that there was a very important need. We introduced sampler bags for coffee industry 5-6 years back, and back then there was no option. I mean, you would get very, very cheap bags which would not preserve aroma, moisture, and at the same time the whole decision making of buying the coffee would be dependent on those samples. So preserving samples and shipping samples in best of the packaging is very, very critical. So this is the first point where this whole story starts at the roasting end. So you should be using more of sampler bags for getting the samples, high quality, high barrier sampler bags. Then again, at the if you're talking about baristas, they would like to have smaller packing, because that avoids that removes the need for lifting very heavy bags and carrying very heavy bags, and also buying coffee in bigger batches, so they can buy in smaller quantities, say 25 pounds, say 30 kilos. So these are the kind of packaging which is very very much appreciated at the consumption area, and this adds a lot of value for somebody who is importing coffee and selling it at their end, and they would want coffee to go in best of the conditions at every cafeteria. So smaller packaging has a significant role to play. Ecotact packaging has packaging from 200 grams up to 1 tons. So in between we have all the ranges. We start with sampler bags up to 5 kg from 200 grams. Then we have introduced a newer packaging which is known as throw seal, and which you can seal and reopen 3 times. So it is 25 pounds. So it becomes very convenient for a cafe guy, to have that kind of packaging. Mm-hmm. Then we also have vacuum packaging of 5 kg, 12 kg, 15 kg. So vacuum packaging is also getting very popular in the developed countries, where coffee consumption of specialty coffee consumption is very high. So this kind of packaging is highly appreciated and has an important role.
Yes, I was going to ask about the vacuum packaging. Is there any difference between the vacuum packaging and comparing with the hermetic bags that are not vacuum sealed in terms of the efficiency to increase the shelf life of the bean, or is it just a convenience for the size?
See, there are 2 aspects to it. Both have same role to play. Vacuum packaging has the same role to play. Hermetic packaging per se, hermetic storage bags have the same role to play to preserve coffee for a longer duration. But when you are packing in regular hermetic storage bags, it tends to take more space. It is in the transportation has a different method. Whereas when you are packing in vacuum, it takes lesser space. You can use cardboard boxes to pack, and in container also you can put in a lot more quantity of coffee than compared to hermetic package, regular hermetic storage bags. So this is the essential difference. And you have more options of customization. Although Ecotact provides customization even in hermetic storage also, from smallest size to highest size, we provide a lot of customization. In vacuum bags also we do the same. But in vacuumization, you need a vacuum machine, which is not the case in case of regular storage bags. That becomes a little difficult many a times at the production level. At the producer's level, you don't always have all the facilities of electricity and vacuum packaging and machine and so on and so forth. So that becomes difficult many a times. So it's again a matter of convenience many a times, wherein you choose hermetic over vacuum and sometimes vacuum over hermetic. Both the systems have the similar role to play.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think that's very clarifying. So Hanuman, I'm done with my questions, and I realize we are approaching to the end of the live in terms of the time. So I would like to thank you for your availability, for your insights, and congratulate you for your work in front of Ecotact. So really thank you for your time. It was great to speak with you. We will be uploading this video on PDG IGTV very, very soon. So whoever wants to take a look at what we just discussed, a lot of insights about green bean moisture, how it affects quality in the cup, how it affects roasting, the importance of it, and many other topics we discuss, just go to PDG IGTV. We'll be uploading there very, very soon.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank each one of you, to be part of this. And I would also like to add that if anybody has any question, please feel free to contact me directly. You can visit ecotactbags.com and you can put in your questions. You will quickly get the response from us. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Nicholas.
Thank you, Hanuman. It was great to speak with you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.